Hello from Board Developer. It's Business Ahas, a show about the eureka moment that launched you into the next level of success. I'm here with your host, Jim Hayden, and I'd like to welcome our fantastic guest this month, Brian Sallee. Brian is a serial entrepreneur, a seasoned technology executive, and an expert on cloud technology and disruptive marketing. Amongst other ventures, Brian founded and held the CEO position for a renowned cloud computing business and built it up to a profitable asset for all investors. After starting and running a variety of businesses, including a successful web hosting company, Brian founded Reviora in 2007. In 8 years, his company grew using cutting-edge marketing and unmatched brand integrity as a cloud computing company. The company offered business cloud solutions for ERP with multiple data centers and an international office. We cannot wait to hear his business aha. Take it away, Jim.
Oh my gosh, Danny, thank you for a great introduction of Brian. And Brian, gosh, it's great having you, great seeing you again. It's been just a fabulous relationship. We've known each other for more than a dozen years, and we probably spoke consistently for all dozen years. I remember first meeting you, you were single, not married, no children, and now married, 2 boys. It's such a life change, both personally and professionally, with your successes. I'm proud to call you my friend, and it's been great working the business together over the course of the years. And I can't wait to hear today's aha moment, because obviously of us working together for the last 12 plus years, I'm curious if maybe I might know what the aha moment was, but maybe you'll surprise me, and it'll be something I haven't heard of. And just as the rules for everybody, and as a reminder, I don't know the aha moment. I find out literally at the same exact time all of you do. So I'm very excited to hear from Brian today. And with that, Brian, take it away. Wow.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you can probably remember the time frame of the aha moment. So it was probably back in 2009, 2010, give or take. And if you had met me at the time, I was building my cloud data center business. At the time, I would have told you we were unique, we were cool, we were special, we were doing really, really innovative things around technology. Looking back, I would tell you we did everything for everybody. And if anybody had a technology need, we did it. We said yes. From video conferencing to computer repair to email hosting to something complicated with scanning or financial systems. And through the course of that, I would almost use the word accidentally, ended up with a customer in one of our data centers that ended up being a very large, very, very large customer, multi-year contract in the financial software space. And like many of our customers, we did a great job for them. They were happy. They were on recurring income. They were a reasonable amount of work, but very, very doable. You know, we did a good job. And we're kind of bopping around with all these other customers. And for argument's sake, you know, that one customer probably was almost tenfold the revenue per month of our average customer, right? And for me, I remember going out to eat, and I don't remember where my family was at the time, but my dad actually took me out to dinner one night, and we're just chatting. And he's not a businessman, but he's very smart and very astute. He's an engineer. And we're just kind of chatting through business stuff. And he's like, hey, you seem like you're spread pretty thin and doing this, that, and the other. He's like, you've got this one customer and they pay you every month and they're in this very specific niche. Why don't you go look for more of those customers? And it was like that aha moment that really clicked for me of, wow, yes, actually probably laser focusing and niching down on that specific industry would totally be worth it. So it didn't happen overnight, but I did go back to the office and met with the team, and we subsequently started to phase out a lot of the random things that we did. It wasn't that we dropped any customers or anything like that, but we stopped accepting people who needed help with their smartphone or whatever it was. And we decided we were going to be the best in the world. We wanted to be the best in the world at Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2009, which before I started the company, I probably couldn't have spelled the name of the product either. But that's what we did for one of our biggest customers. And the aha moment really clicked for me as I looked around, and we looked around, and we found out we possibly were the best in the world at that particular product, at least arguably, right? We looked around, we couldn't find anybody else. And so we said, great, we're going to focus on Microsoft Dynamics. If you're not familiar with that one today, I know technology is obsolete every 3 years ago, but it's essentially Microsoft accounting software is what it was. And we looked around, we had 400 users overnight, and we decided to market it and niche down and focus on it. And we found out we were, top, if not the best in the world. And we subsequently got actually a huge 5-figure grant from Microsoft because they believed in what we were doing, and they actually started funding our data center. And we changed our marketing, we changed our messaging, and it really was that aha light bulb moment that drastically impacted. And we were growing pretty quick before then, but after that, it was almost like a hockey stick, and that's when the business really started to scale pretty quick.
That's fascinating. And I wrote down 2 words. I wrote down the word dad, and I wrote down the word laser focus. That's 2 words. And I think all too often, we as young adults and then become older adults, we learn over the course of time to really appreciate the wisdom that dads can share. And I think that because I think your mind as a young entrepreneur, as I well know, goes 100,000 miles an hour. Always thinking of something that's new, innovative, exciting. What's going to be the newest thing, the greatest thing that's going to really move the needle? And he said something that made you say, wow, that really makes a lot of logical sense. And then you went back with the group. When you went back to the group and you started to go down this path of refocusing, instead of doing 13 different things that really narrow on 1 or 2, did you get much pushback, or do they embrace it?
It's been a while, so I don't know that I could remember anything from a specific meeting, but I can tell you on the technical side, it probably was a breath of fresh air, because the technicians saw a light at the end of the tunnel, that they had fewer products to worry about and fewer things to manage. Again, not overnight, but they could start to see over the next month or 2. And then I'm guessing from what I recall, on the sales side, it was not very well received at first, because to a salesperson means they can't sell everything anymore. And so it definitely was a balance. It was hard to do, but I think it did make a difference. And, I think it's important to put context around it, because I'm still a big believer in diversification, still a big believer in multiple income streams. If you're investing, don't niche down, right? You want to invest in multiple things. But like you, Jim, I spend a fair amount of my week with smart entrepreneurs and leaders. And I feel like many of them are fighting against themselves, because if you're smart and you're talented, it means you can say yes to a lot of things, and you can do a lot of things. And so, especially on the starting side, or when you're hitting an inflection point with growing your business, whether you're hitting $1 million in revenue or $100 million in revenue, there is a time where if you're spread too thin and your staff is spread too thin, you've got to make some decisions that laser focusing. It's the number one thing I share with people today is laser focus. And I think it can be split too. You laser focus on a buyer persona. If you're marketing, laser focus on a niche, if you're looking for a product or service. And then thirdly, laser focus on your messaging. I think that messaging and marketing quickly gets convoluted, because I bet you 9 out of 10 conversations I feel like I have we have been around for a ton of years and do everything for everybody. And there's not a lot of business leaders who are willing to stand up and say, we do this one thing, we do it really, really well, and we're crushing it. And that's what we stand for, and that's what we're behind. And it's a challenge.
Would you say that it's not novel to give advice to an entrepreneur to tell them to laser focus? But what the novel part might be is when the entrepreneur decides to laser focus. I mean, obviously you had your dinner with your dad. He said, why don't you double down on this one client that pays you every single month? And then that was kind of a light bulb that went off for you. I guess I'm really curious, and let's drill a little bit on an entrepreneur. Think about that for a moment, who's thinking about 5, 10 different ideas, diversifying. If the client asked to do anything had to do with technology, we would say yes to it because that's kind of who we were in the beginning days. And then as the time moved on, and then the conversation with Dad, I'm curious though, if you were to give advice to an entrepreneur that has a business that has several services, when do they decide to literally take that and narrow it down or laser into one?
Great question. I observe it most often when there is either an inflection point or some type of a barrier. Meaning, if everything's going great and all the products are profitable and multiple things are working, then honestly, it doesn't really come up in a topic of conversation, at least with me, very often. So for me, I see it most often when there is some type of a hold up, a barrier. You know, I literally have talked to probably 4 or 5 companies in the past year who, for whatever reason, get stuck around 12 million revenue. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't have a crystal ball, but they'll tell me we did $11.8 million 2 years ago and $11.9 million this year and $12 million if we're lucky this year, and we don't know what to do because we have a great team, we have a great website, we don't know who to fire. Our product works, like our net promoter scores are happy, but we're not growing. And that's usually where that topic comes out is, okay, you've got to do something different. What got you to 12 million in revenue in this scenario worked for you, congratulations, but you need to do something different. And that may mean niching down. And it's at least something to talk about.
Could the event that happens to niche down is when revenue no longer continues to move? Hence the $12 million number. But if you've hit a plateau or a glass ceiling, and I like the term glass ceiling, you've hit this glass ceiling at whatever that amount is, 5 million, 1 million, 50 million. And if you've hit it and you've stayed there and you've really not moved from there, is it then time to look around from the outside looking in and maybe then laser focusing on the one thing that you do the best at?
As you all listen to this, you might have a different outcome. There may be a new product you have to launch, and that could absolutely be the case. But in terms of that aha moment for me, it was that we were doing too much for everybody. And to be perfectly candid, as soon as my dad said it, I knew it. It wasn't a shock. It was something that I could immediately identify with. And I think that when I share that encouragement to other entrepreneurs and leaders, they either know it immediately or they don't. And yes.
I think it really fascinates me as well is that you made a comment early on about your dad not being a business guy, but my dad's really smart. And maybe it takes the entrepreneur to not talk to a savvy business person, maybe it does, but to talk with somebody that has a perspective that's very, very different than yours. He saw you spreading yourself too thin. That was his motive to then say to you, maybe you should not be so spread thin and do something that is laser focused on one thing. I presume not knowing that you had revenue that was X or Y, or your quantity of clients that you had. He just saw his son being really burning the candle at both ends, but his perspective, which is very different than maybe a normal business book that you would read or a normal other entrepreneur you would speak to. I mean, if you go get advice from another entrepreneur, they're going to say, no, do the 25 additional things that are in your head. But it's interesting to get a perspective that is very different than the perspective that might be like yours. I presume you would agree?
Absolutely. And I've heard it said that it's better to be an inch wide and a mile deep than inch deep and a mile wide when it comes to most businesses. And it's been interesting to observe other businesses that many businesses I know who have very rapidly accelerated from 0 to 7 figures, like inception to 7 figures and beyond, were because of niching down. They're because they found one product and service, one buyer persona. They just were crystal clear about their messaging and what they did. And that attributed a lot of success to their growth. So
niche down and talk to dad.
There you go. It's worked for me.
I'm sure he would appreciate that immensely. So Brian, does your dad know that he was that inspiration when you decided to niche down?
He does. We have talked about it since then, and I give him full credit for it.
Wow. And does he recognize that, wow, I let you made a difference? Or is he like moved on to other humble things that he's part of his life?
I think he moves on, you know.
Well, that's super. From our co-hosts, either Carrie or Danny, has there been any questions, or do you have any questions for Brian?
Yeah, Brian, so earlier you mentioned, in the tech industry, there's always new products, new programs, new solutions coming out. So how do you niche down and also be on the leading edge of what's up and coming or being innovative? To me, that seems like kind of contradictory. So I'm curious as to how you reconcile those two concepts.
That's a really good question. I think of it in terms of those three things, which is your messaging, your buyer persona, and then what you do. And the messaging, I think, should be generic enough that it's really solving the product and the need of what the customer is. That you are solving something ultimately, that you might solve it today using version 1 of some technology, but a year from now, you're still going to solve that same core problem. So that's the one aspect. And what goes along right behind that is the buyer persona, which is who is the customer that you're solving that pain point for. And similar, it may change because of technology. And you're right, things get obsolete pretty quick. But if you're niching down on that buyer persona and it's a certain type of person with a certain type of problem, then you being the subject matter expert and the authority in that space will just help your business grow quicker. And then the third element falls right in line, which is now your product or service is following closely in alignment with that. And again, maybe you weren't using AI 3 years ago and you are today. Who knows? Maybe you'll be using holograms 3 years from now. But that same core niche matches your messaging, your persona, and could still massively accelerate and increase the value of your business.
Interesting. That's a great question. I agree with you, Carrie. Go ahead, Carrie.
I feel like I just had an aha moment from Brian's answer. Brian, that was so good. I think when you originally were talking about this, I was thinking like, oh yeah, like, be an expert in a niche area. And what I heard you just say is it's not just being an expert in a niche program or a solution, it's understanding the pain point. You're an expert on that pain point and how you're solving that problem or that need. And it doesn't matter what solution your company is focusing on, it's the need and the person that you're focusing on. Thank you. That was awesome.
Exactly. I think you restated it better than I did. I'm in the technology field, so I like giving examples that are not technology. But I think about, buying landscaping service. You could be competing with a lawnmower or a monthly landscaping service, and a customer doesn't buy either one. They're buying shorter grass, and they're willing to pay something versus their time for short grass. And it's okay to pick one or the other, right? It's okay to either sell them the lawnmower or sell them the service. But it's a matter of applying that regardless of what industry you're in.
Interesting metaphor.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, that was great. I think that it really resonated on if you could, and then you start thinking about then your what is your customer? Because obviously we talk about personas, Brian, right? And we talk about what personas are. And as a customer, from a persona perspective, are you truly defining who your customer is? So as your example of the landscaping, is your customer the manufacturer of a lawnmower? Is your customer a manufacturer or a delivery of service? Or is your customer the person that you're hiring to actually cut your grass? I mean, just kind of walk through as, what is the persona at the end of the day of the customer? And then what is that organizational pain point? Would you agree, Brian?
I would, absolutely, 100%.
Interesting. So can you give, I hate to put you on the spot, can you give an example of a businesses that you finally saw what the pain point was, and then you laser focused on that pain point, and you're able to see in themselves an aha moment or that change, like, oh, wow, okay, now we're on it.
Sure, I'll give one that I'll keep anonymous because they are a customer, but there's one customer that I've worked with for a couple of years, and when I started, they were about 20 million in revenue. In very, very long story short, it came down to, even though they were providing a lot of hardware and tangible product for the entire state of Florida, the product was actually a means to an end. And by changing and doing exactly what we're talking about today, they went from 20 to almost 65 million in about 2 years. And they put a lot of hard work into it, but it really came down to that. There's another one that I love, and I won't mention the name because I can't remember who they are, but you can Google it, or I'll Google it after the show. Is I love talking to entrepreneurs about how you can literally make money doing anything you want to do. Is there's some phenomenal businesswoman, I believe she was in California, who started buying old coconut shells and cutting them in half, right? So it's literally garbage. I have no idea what she paid for them, but let's just use the example of pennies, and filling them with wax and turning them into floating candelabras for pools and mansions. So her cost of goods sold was trash, some wax, candles. I don't know, maybe it's $1, right? A couple dollars, less than $1. And then selling them for $20, $30 each to mansions in Beverly Hills. And I just love telling that story because I don't remember which magazine I read that in or where I heard that, but what an incredible example of somebody who just was very smart, obviously, but they figured out how to niche down into something that was incredibly well laser focused, and certainly probably put any of my businesses to shame in terms of profit margin, marketing, you name it. You know, she was able to just take it to a 7-figure business because of having massive profit margins, a really great product or service, and something that people were very happy to pay money for. And they wanted a floating candelabras in their pool, and so she was the place to go.
What was that person's pain point though? The buyer.
Well, the buyer's looking for aura, right? They're looking for atmosphere. They've got a pool party, birthday party. They want to have a candle floating in their pool.
So maybe is it a pain point, but it's solving something for the persona customer. It's solving something that they have a need to solve. Maybe they've not thought about before. I doubt anybody on the planet thought about putting a floating coconut with wax in it in their swimming pool before she exposed them to it. And once she did, then they're like, oh my gosh, I have to have that. And her business then in turn was successful. That's fascinating. And so it isn't always a pain point, but it's solving something. Is that fair?
Right. Absolutely. And if you think about how else do you illuminate your pool, if you've got a birthday party, anniversary, some type of celebration, you want more lighting in your pool, something cool, something talkable. You're looking for ideas that are innovative and something unique. And this lady's business was the answer to that. So I see those almost every week of like, wow, that is an incredible way. And it just validates and it continues to validate that aha moment for me every week, every month since I learned that myself. And it's made a big difference.
That's super. Danny and/or Carrie, any other questions for Brian?
Well, I actually have one on the topic of messaging, right? So that lady, she developed sort of the coconut business based off of introducing the idea, hey, you need a floating coconut in your pool. When you introduced your business to new clients after your business aha, was your talking point like, hey, we're laser focused, or did you sort of like adjust based on your aha?
That's a great question. So we did adjust our messaging to essentially say we're the best in the world. Granted, not with those terminologies, but we said we're the experts, whatever it was that we said. This is our focus, this is what we're really good at. And in our scenario, Microsoft Dynamics NAV was powering financials for businesses. And they were very accustomed to paying a lot of money to deploy that product to power tens of millions of dollars of financials for their business. And they wanted the best. And so it became a selling point is we want to work with the best company. And of course, we had to be competitive and we had to prove that we did a good job and we had to have social proof and all those things as well. But it did become something that was incorporated in our messaging, and we found it easier to sell. And the other thing too that was pretty interesting to me looking back at it, and I didn't realize at the time, is there were a fair amount of other Microsoft financial products that were not as intensive as that particular one. And so even though we niched in our messaging in that scenario, people assumed that we could do a good job in other areas as well. So if we could accomplish this level of service on that financial system for 400 users, then selling to somebody who only had 20 users became much, much easier, especially when they were in that same, they really were in the same buyer persona, if you will.
Did you by chance, Brian, use that customer as an example as you sold them moving forward? And did that customer prove to be that much more of a selling point because of your success with them?
We did indeed. And that's really where social proof comes in, is people want to see reviews. They want to see actual case studies. You know, even if I'm signing up for a vendor today or tomorrow, it's one of the first questions I'll ask is, great, it sounds good, show me a customer. So we did that exact same thing. And in our world, you know, back then with that particular product, we had a great relationship with the customer. They knew a lot of people. It was a small enough world in the Microsoft world that they were willing to jump on calls for us, vouch, give us testimonials. I don't recall if we actually did a video, but that's kind of where those video and social proof type of things come into place.
Brian, it's been absolutely a pleasure to obviously reconnect with you and chat about your aha moment. And I'm obviously thinking back again to Dad. I'll use the acronym MBW, which is the messaging, buyer persona, and then what you do. And then that laser focus into a niche. When you hit a certain level in an organization and decide to then refocus on something that you're really good at, but then get that light bulb to go off by somebody, smacking you or saying something to you that is the kind of light bulb goes off. Because when your dad said it to you, you instantly knew he was right. And I think that's interesting that as a business owner, entrepreneur, leader, those opportunities that you have to speak with people where that light bulb does go off, it's pretty remarkable. And it's we kind of underplay it and undersell it in the world of, what were those 1-2 things that happened that were maybe in an accident that allowed you to be and have the success that you have. So Brian, on behalf of our entire team here at Business Ahas and Board Developer, thank you so much for being with us today. And we really appreciate it. It's been a great story to tell, and I've enjoyed hearing it for the very first time.
It's my pleasure. Love chatting with you guys today. And I'm happy to share. It's one of the things that I've used to scale my business. I've got some free resources available. If anybody's interested, let me know. I'm happy to share those. It's just something I'm passionate about. And if anybody needs help figuring out what their laser focus should be and how to do that, I'm happy to share that with anyone that would like it.
So my best to you, my friend, your family, and your boys. And until next time, take care.
Thank you for tuning in to Business Ahas, brought to you by Board Developer. If you enjoyed Brian's story and could relate to his business aha moment, please share this podcast with your friends. We'd really appreciate it.